Okay, we're going to begin this evening with a reading by Rona Altrows. And Rona Altrows is a writer, editor, and playwright with a passion for voice. The everyday lives of real and fictional people fascinate her, and their preoccupations are also hers. Her 10-minute plays have been produced in Canada and the United States. A piece from At This Juncture was shortlisted for an Alberta Literary Award. Her previous books are A Run on Hose, which won the W.O. Mitchell Book Prize, and Key in Lock, both of which I believe are available here at Shelf Life. She has edited or co-edited 3 anthologies, and if you'd like to learn more about Rona and her work, you can find that out at www.ronaaltrows.com. And we also have stacks of At This Juncture here at Shelf Life. I'll put a link in the chat there in a moment. I'll give you a little description of this wonderful book. She writes letters because she feels that something must be done. Meet Ariadne Jensen, passionate communicator, writer of historical fiction, concerned citizen. Each letter tells a story, and together they tell a bigger story about Ariadne's determination to set wrongs right and her sly humor and her fierce loyalty to her best friend Leo, a young gay man. So please join me in welcoming Rona Altrows. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kyle. Very generous and warm introduction. I do want to thank Shelf Life Books for hosting Lenore and me tonight. And special thanks to you, Kyle, and to your colleague, Hen, who is the co-coordinator of events at Shelf Life Books, along with you. You both helped us so much with the planning, promotion, and presentation of this event. Shelf Life staff, you are the best. To everyone watching and listening tonight, thank you so much for being here. We're glad you're here. And Lenore Rowntree, thanks for being not only a fine writer, but also a fun and meticulous collaborator. People who are not meticulous, I don't enjoy working with as much, perhaps. Well, I always find meticulous people to work with because that's who I want to work with. Anyway, Lenore is meticulous and fun. I'm going to read abridged versions of a couple of pieces now from my book At This Juncture. As Kyle noted, it's a book of letters written by one fictional person, Ariadne Jensen. She's in her 50s. She loves to read, especially history and biography, and she also loves to write letters. Now, some of the letters in At This Juncture are from Ariadne in her own voice and about her own life. She writes letters to and about people she has met or would like to meet or wishes she had never met. I will start with one of those personal letters to the president of my alumni association from Ariadne Jensen. Calgary, Alberta, September 1st, 2012. Dear Alumni Association President, since my university graduation 32 years ago, I have received numerous letters, phone calls, and emails requesting a donation to my alma mater, and I have consistently declined. Once, when approached on the phone, I asked a question and told your representative that if I received a satisfactory answer, I would donate. Call back within 2 weeks was promised, but never came. Consequently, my response to all subsequent requests for funds has been negative. Yet, Your pursuit continues unabated. Yesterday, within half an hour, your representatives called me twice. Frankly, I've had enough. What to do? If I took my story to the media, they would not pick it up. After all, what is my angle? Still, something must be done. So I have decided to appeal to your higher nature and explain to you personally why my alma mater will never see any of my money. In return, please call off your alumni sicking dogs. The first time it happened, I was in my university days. I was shy and a keener. Between classes, I studied. The libraries were my favorite places to read, think, and write. And I was in the main library, seated at a long table where I could see other students and the occasional professor. Other people sat down at the table too. And although we did not interact, I found their presence comforting. The stacks were to my left. I saw a student wandering through them. He had picked up a book, and then he would return it to the shelf, take a few steps, and pick up another book. He looked aimless, with his wire-rimmed glasses, t-shirt, scraggly hair. He resembled many other boys on campus. But then I noticed his penis protruded from the bottom. I was frightened. I gasped. I gathered up my books and sprinted to the circulation desk to report what I'd seen. All right, the librarian said. Her tone and expression were flat. I may as well have told her I was returning an overdue book. Later that day, ready for another study session, I chose the Physical Sciences Library. Its design suited my preferences perfectly. Long tables. I opened my American literature anthology and got to work. As I sat reading Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, an early American writing by the hellfire and brimstone preacher Jonathan Edwards, who should walk through the turnstile but the exhibitionist and cutoffs. Clearly, the woman at the circulation desk in the main library had not called the police or even campus security after I spoke with her. When the boy first arrived at physical sciences, no parts were exposed. He headed straight for the stacks. A few minutes later, I saw him again, pulling the same trick as he had earlier in the day. Clearly, he had been emboldened by getting a reaction at the other library and facing no consequences from the authorities. This time, I was clear-headed but angry. I walked to the circulation desk, gave my incident report, and received the same blasé reaction as I had gotten at the main library. The two librarians could have been the same person. A week later, on a chilly winter night, my classmate, Alicia, and I were leaving campus when we came across a different guy about our age, standing in front of the student union building, exposing himself. Unlike me, Alicia was a quick thinker. Put that thing away, she said. You'll catch your death of cold. She found the incident amusing, but I was shaken. I became depressed. No sightings on campus and my lingering memories of them. The pressure of exams and papers got to me. I was lonely, disoriented, so far away from my family, my hometown. Finally, I dragged myself to the university's health clinic where I filled out a questionnaire and was given an appointment with a psychiatrist. I think you're just a little blue, he said. Go out and get drunk. But I'm barely 18 and I don't drink, I said. Learn, he said. Then a guy in my introductory anthropology section suffered from a break from reality in class and trembled and screamed until he was taken away. He spent a year in treatment. The university kicked him out. 2 years later, they let him return, but with strict conditions. He couldn't do this, couldn't do that. He was not allowed back on the university basketball team because, well, he never did say why. Now, I will share with you the question to which I never received an answer. What is the university doing to help students preserve their mental health or restore it if they lose it? Sincerely, Ariadne Jensen. Now, other letters in At This Juncture seem to be historical, but they have really been written by Ariadne in the voice of some person, fictional or real, living or dead. For the historical letters, the book is entirely accurate as far as the known facts go. But the book enters into historical lives fictionally at points where speculation is possible. For example, we all know about that big military fight in Quebec in 1759 between two obnoxiously colonizing powers. But what was General James Wolfe thinking and doing the night before the Battle of the Plains of Abraham? Nobody really knows, and that's where At This Juncture comes in, as Wolfe, through Ariadne, through me, writes a letter to his mother. But that's not the historical letter I'm going to read here tonight. In the letter I am going to read, Ariadne enters into the mind and heart of Xanthippe, who was a real Athenian woman, the wife of Socrates. The letter is to Aspasia, the lover of the one-time ruler of Athens, Pericles, and the mother of their son, also named Pericles. But Aspasia was also, in her day, a highly respected philosopher. Now her name is not much recognized. Well, when it is, it's usually as somebody sexually liberated or a courtesan or something like that. But she's not much recognized today for her intellectual contributions, likely because of her gender. And here then is Ariadne's letter to Aspasia from Xanthippe. Athens, Hecatombian 18, Olympiad 93-4. Xanthippe to Aspasia, greetings. I write you on a matter of some urgency, although nothing dire has yet come to pass. Nevertheless, I see Athens going downhill, our treasured democracy collapsing, and I fear for what may lie ahead. Especially, I fear for my husband and what will become of his work when he is gone. Even if he lives out a full natural life, how much longer can it last, as he is in his mid-60s? For as long as we've been together, I have been asking Socrates to write his ideas down. He simply will not listen. I should not be surprised. This is a man who will not charge a fee for his work and refuses to buy a pair of shoes if he cannot be convinced in such small matters. How can I talk him into something as important as recording his thoughts? Socrates believes it is only through speaking with others that he can do his work. No writing, he says, can accurately represent questions that lead to responses that lead to more questions. He would lose the threads of argument, he says, the nuances of tone, all the features of conversation that enhance meaning as he engages with people. I worry that some of the younger men who follow Socrates will wait until he dies and then write down what they think he said when he is not present to correct them. Xenophon and Plato are the two I suspect the most. They always have tablets and styluses with them when they walk with Socrates. What do they write? Why does Socrates not ask to read their writings? Those two may have ideas of their own that they want to promote. What if after Socrates dies, they attribute their own ideas to him or say he endorsed those ideas in order to give themselves more credibility? Worse, what if Xenophon or Plato put forward a theory as his own, but it is really Socrates' theory? I worry about what they will write, but also about what they will not write. Socrates opposes slavery. It is natural for him to feel that way, coming as he does from a modest background, as the son of a stonecutter, and a stonecutter himself, until he took up the calling of philosophy full time. Xenophon and Plato are aristocrats. Will they write down that Socrates believed slavery to be wrong, or will they omit that because it is not convenient for them? Socrates also believes women should receive the same education as men, that our lowly place in society should be elevated. I have always suspected Plato of having the heart of an oligarch. Will he write down that Socrates believed women should have equal rights? I know my husband thinks highly of you, not only because you wrote speeches for your dear Pericles, but also because of your grace on the many occasions that philosophers have assembled at your home to exchange ideas. Would you consider doing something for me? Would you walk around the city with Socrates every day for, say, 30 days as he engages in conversation? Afterwards, write down what he and his interlocutors have said. Then there will be at least one written record that is wholly accurate. That will set my mind at ease. I will have some copies made. In fact, I have just purchased a good quantity of papyrus for the purpose. Be assured that our acquaintanceship will not stand in the way of my paying you a fair price. I must admit to a much smaller secondary purpose. By taking this action, I hope to somewhat rehabilitate my own reputation. I'm thought to be respectable but a shrew. I'm not sure where the misperception originates, certainly not with Socrates. If a few kind words about me were to find their way into the writings, I would be pleased. Favor me by taking care of yourself and young Pericles. Farewell. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rona. I appreciate it. That was Rona Altrows reading from At This Juncture. I'm just going to drop a link to that book in our web store in the chat there, so you have it at hand. Just thank you so much. I mean, both letters are excellent. I really love all the details about Socrates' life and being followed around and have his conversations written down. So next we will have a reading by Lenore Rowntree. Lenore Rowntree's latest book is the linked collection, See You Later, Maybe Never. Her works also include Cluck, a novel, and the anthology Hidden Lives, True Stories from People Who Live with Mental Illness. Her plays have been produced in Vancouver and on the Sunshine Coast. She is one of the founders of Figment Magazine, a new literary and arts magazine about mental health. Lenore currently resides in Vancouver and Gibsons, BC. You can find out more about Lenore Rowntree at lenorerowntree.com. And we have Lenore's brand new book with a beautiful cover, I might say. See You Later, Maybe Never. Now, here's a description of this new book. Her name is Vanessa, and she is pissed off with getting old. Forced out of her job, she freewheels into the destruction of her marriage, sending her on a comical retreat to a holistic campus on a Gulf island. Intelligent and funny, and like life, sometimes tragic, Vanessa learns old is not a dirty word. See You Later, Maybe Never is described by Sharon Butala as dense with detail and nuance. The stories are fully fleshed, satisfying, and time again will jolt the reader with recognition. Please join me in welcoming Lenore Rowntree.
Thank you, Kyle, and thank you, Rona, for your reading. I'm very grateful to indie bookstores like Shelf Life Books for representing writers and doing the work that reviewers don't do much anymore, and newspapers don't do much anymore, and help us get the word out. So thank you, and thank you to Rona for the inspiration this evening. On the theme of belonging, I have to say, as I was writing See You Later, Maybe Never, I hadn't thought about belonging as a theme or even as any kind of thread that could stitch the book together. And that's probably a good thing, or I would have totally messed it up. Because if I'm conscious of things, often I overdo it or I just screw it up. So to the extent I was aware that I was writing to theme, rebellion against aging was really the only conscious theme. And so when I finished writing, though, I realized belonging is certainly a part of what I was writing too. And at any age, it's a challenge to belong. It's not a new theme. Rona's Xanthippa is aware she doesn't fit in. People think she's a shrew. And it's interesting that this tag has lasted with her through time. If you look Xanthippa up on Wiki, or Wikipedia, I guess it was, it mentions that she was a shrew. So, all these centuries later, instances of belonging can become legendary. And recently, I think the landscape of belonging has become even more complex with cancel culture and political correctness. New questions are arising. Am I belonging? Am I belonging hard enough? Am I belonging in the right way? A couple of stories in this book made me so nervous to publish. They're about racism, and it's interesting. I'm not reading from either one of them, so I guess I'm still nervous. But a nervousness is always a sign that I need a sensitivity reader. And so I hired one, and now I questioned, did I hire someone who was too liberal, too accepting? So, on and on it goes about belonging. So I'm going to open with a short passage from the beginning of a story called Gladiola Island. In this story, this link collection really is mostly written from the point of view of the character Vanessa. And in this story, she's recently unemployed and even more recently separated from her husband, Tom. And she has mixed feelings about all of this. And she's off on her adventure to the holistic campus for the first time as a single 60-year-old. And she's not all that happy about being 60. In fact, she's a little bit pissed off. So here's from the beginning of that story. Vanessa watches her silly square hybrid rental car rock between a decaying Econoline van and a dilapidated gray Toyota, with spirit catchers hanging from every fastener. The van's so old, it could have been on the last BC ferry she sailed 30 years ago. She is headed for what should be an island paradise at the top of the Georgia Strait. but she can only focus on whether it's going to be the murderer's van or the hippie's spirit car that scratches her rental. She breathes in, breathes out, tries to be mindful, looks to the horizon for balance. For a moment, all she can see is ocean rolling up to meet the sky. It should have liberated her. The trip seemed like a good idea when she ducked into the organic grocers to wait out the pissing spring rainstorm and spotted a stack of 2018 Laurel Bush Center catalogs beside the fresh raspberries. What could be better than a writer's retreat on Gladiola Island in the middle of August? But as the weeks ticked down and the Toronto weather improved, worries about her choice started to mount. What if people think my writing is worse than Hallmark? What if I think some of Hallmark's cards are clever? What if my room's unsleepable? Worse, what if I forget something essential? Even the catalog warns no stores on the island. The sight of the looming island makes her queasy, so she stops looking out and walks the deck instead. There's something a little off about the crowd. Some are just island folk, straw hats, and mismatched wool socks. And a few are vacationing families, a boy, a girl, a mom, a dad, and various combinations. A lot, like more than half, are couples around her age, middle-aged or so, and mostly well-heeled. This is remarkable. Men don't go to writing workshops, especially not with their wives. When Vanessa finally spots another woman who seems to be on her own, she slows her pace to ask, "Are you headed to Laurel Bush?" "Yes," the woman practically gushes, "for sharing the heart trail. And you? Are you here with your hubby?" Vanessa staggers a bit with the shift of the ferry. Or perhaps it's the woman's response. Is she going to be navigating a horde of exploring couples at the center? She would never signed up if she'd known, especially since the split with Tom has not gone totally smoothly. She ekes out a weak smile. "No, I'm going for a writing workshop." "Oh," says the woman. "I didn't know they ran other courses this week." "Me either," says Vanessa. Then, for no reason Vanessa can fathom, the woman pushes her sunglasses up her nose and says, "You'll do fine." So that's it from that story. I'm now going to turn to another story called Acorn. Before I read from it, I've got to say that recently I've been mining through a bunch of old family stuff. I've dredged up some toothless pictures of myself in grade school, some knobby-kneed photos of me in my preteen years. And looking at these photos, they acutely remind me how much we all struggle to belong, to fit in, and that's from a really young age. So the next bit I'm going to read is from this story, which is a part of a backstory on Vanessa. In this story, she's only 12. Her father has lost his job. Her parents are breaking up, and no one has helped her with this science project that she's been assigned by her teacher, Mrs. Bridgman. Vanessa has picked some used popsicle sticks out of the garbage to make some name tags for the little trees she's dug up. And she's dropped her display while she's walking to school, so it's kind of a mess. And this is one of those first times in about grade 5 or 6 when you have to do a serious presentation in front of the class for marks. So a couple of the kids have gone already where I pick up on this story. Rudy Elias puts his hand up and asks if he could present next. Everybody used Rudy's first and last names when they referred to him. Even though he was only Rudy, he was the only Rudy in the school. He was from Egypt, and his real name was Ruad. He was pudgy, but had beautiful, smooth-looking skin. Vanessa didn't really know him except that he lived in the biggest house up on the hill, and he got picked up after school in a car with a fancy ornament of a leaping tiger that a man who wasn't his father drove. It's a chauffeur, Bettina had told her one day. Rudy wasn't popular, but Vanessa felt a kinship toward him, maybe because both of them got ignored a lot. But there was something more. When she watched him bent over his book, writing intently, his cursive elegant, she felt calm. She often found herself glancing at the side of his face when she knew he wasn't looking. For some reason, his cheekbone took her to the edge of the ravine where the most fun adventures always began. Secretly, she liked him quite a bit. But she couldn't risk showing him friendship when the rules of engagement around social bounds were so tight at the school. She looked up and smiled at Rudy when he stood to walk toward the front. He smiled back. He looked tense. He was carrying a box covered in an exotic silky cloth. He took the cloth off with a flourish and stood nervously grinning. Inside sat six, this is getting tough, I've got too many S's here. Inside sat 6 matching shiny black pots, same as the shiny one Vanessa had found behind the florist at the shopping center. Each of his pots held a beautiful plant. He said they were called Norway pine, box plant, eelgrass, magnolia, chrysanthemum, and hibiscus. The class giggled when he said, for many years, women were not allowed to drink hibiscus tea in Egypt because Egyptians believed it made them too interested in sex. Stephen yelled right on from the back of the classroom after Rudy added, my mother drinks hibiscus tea all the time for her blood pressure. He finished his presentation by giving everyone in the class a chrysanthemum that he brought out from another box he'd kept hidden under his desk. The mum brings power and grace, he said, as he gave Mrs. Bridgman hers. She blushed. When it was Vanessa's turn, she brought her box of tiny trees to the front and started by apologizing that the box got wet. She had meant to go on and explain what each of the trees were called and how she had dug them up, but she was rattled by the mess on her skirt and by Rudy's beautiful presentation. She managed only to say, I have examples of birch, maple, cedar, oak, and pine. And this is not just any old pine, it's a white pine. I looked it up. She ended quickly saying, the most interesting thing is the oak tree grows from an acorn. I'm sorry, when I dropped the box, the acorn turned to mush. Mrs. Bridgman said, Vanessa, you should never start or end a presentation with an apology. It turns the audience off. Vanessa was grateful Mrs. Bridgman at least had not said anything about the mess on her skirt. The next day, when everyone got to class, Mrs. Bridgman had arranged all the presentations around the perimeter of the room in order of grades. Carl's bouquet was first, followed by Rudy's beautiful box. Charlotte's was near the top because she had set up her Bristol board of pressed leaves like the old-fashioned botanical chart Mrs. Bridgman had brought from the American Museum of Natural History. Even Bettina's project, which had nothing to do with science, was in the middle of the group. Vanessa scanned the room and saw that hers was dead last, next to Stephen's, which was second to last. Stephen had written 2 sentences on a sheet of paper and traced his hand below with a drawing of some sort of leaf inside the hand. All afternoon, Vanessa picked at the hives on her arm, and when she went to the back at the end of the day to grab her box, Mrs. Bridgman came close behind her. I think you could have done better, Vanessa. Dead sticks and dirty containers do not show respect for science. Then Mrs. Bridgman, who was always looking for what she called the teachable moment, added, and used popsicle sticks are not sanitary. We'll be taking up sanitation and health class next week. You will learn how kids can pass worms to each other when they share food. Out of nowhere, Vanessa exploded. I washed the popsicle sticks, and the trees are not dead. I dug them up myself. They're alive. I tried. It's not easy, you know. In her fury, she uprooted the oak by its stem to show its roots. It came out of its pot with several pieces of acorn still attached. When Vanessa saw the tree really was still alive, out of respect for science, she carefully dug it back in, scooping dirt with her fingers and deliberately not looking at Mrs. Bridgman. Oh, you should have explained that, Mrs. Bridgman said. She switched the order of Vanessa's project with Stephen's. Wash your hands in the girls' bathroom on the way out, she said. Leave Stephen's where it is, Vanessa said. She switched the projects back before picking up her box. It felt good for once that Stephen was not last. So thank you all for listening. I'm now going to turn to some questions and have a bit of a conversation with Rona on her book at this juncture. If that's okay with you, Rona?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
By the way, dynamite reading.
Thank you. You too. You know, I can see we're already behind. So, you know, those extra questions at the end, we probably won't get to them, but I'll do the ones on your specific, on the specific of your book anyway. You know, Rona, I have to say, when I was reading your book, I was not only entertained, I learned a whole lot. There's lots of interesting people that I hadn't thought about for a while, and some new ones I'd never heard of before. And I had to Google a lot of the people who sent and received these letters in your book, including Jonathan Edwards, that hellfire preacher you refer to in the president of my alumni association. And I had to Google Aspasia and Xanthippe, which in turn meant I had to refresh on Socrates, Plato, Aristophanes, and Pericles. So one of the delights of your book is to come across people that you rarely encounter day to day. So I'm wondering, are these letters, were they teachers for you too?
Yes, they certainly were. Oh, did you have more that you wanted to ask, or?
Well, no, I mean, I was going to ask you, but I'll ask both and you can answer however you like. I just wondered, what effect did you hope to have on the readers with the letters? Is it a way to teach, to affect change? So, you know, did they teach you, and what did you hope for the readers?
Yes, I am a very curious person and a person who loves to read, but I am not a scholar by profession. I'm kind of a wannabe scholar, or a scholar manqué perhaps, but I'm not a scholar. I just have a curious mind, and you know, Ariadne sort of came to me unbidden, and a lot of the stuff that I looked up in that book, you know, I have some kind of answer written down here that I'm not adhering to. So if I go on too long, just let me know. A lot of the people that I looked up in that book, I mean, I didn't know very much about, that I wrote about in that book, I didn't know very much about either. And also, I've had a number of readers say to me, I had to Google this one, I had to Google that one. Well, I had to Google them too, and I had to read books about them. But what I can tell you is that I had a lot of fun writing the book, more fun than I've had with any book of fiction that I've written so far. I like most writers, I am a constant reader, but I don't know, maybe this has something to do with sense of belonging or not. I have the sense that many of my friends and colleagues who are writers are really fast readers, and I am quite a slow reader. So during the research for the historical pieces and at this juncture, I allowed myself to read all day on many days and at my own pokey pace, and I was able to be satisfied that I had done a day's work.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice to learn while you're working.
exactly.
That's always a good thing.
Right. I also did the research as Ariadne. That is, I let her take over my mind as lead researcher and find things that interested her. So we both learned a lot. And a lot of what we learned didn't make it into the book, at least not directly. But I always remember reading this thing that the poet Yevgeny Yevtushenko said that really has stuck with me. He said, with in our work as writers, everything counts, and what we remove from a piece somehow remains in it. I really believe that.
So I was wondering too, how did you come to choose letters as opposed to, say, short stories or, you know, woven?
Because she introduced herself to me through a letter of complaint that she wrote about a dryer that didn't work. And I didn't know what the heck was going on. I really didn't. I'm not being disingenuous here. But I thought, well, I don't know what's going on, but I'll just keep writing here and maybe I'll find out. And then the letter was signed sincerely Ariadne Jensen. So I thought, well, you're sort of interesting, aren't you? And at the same time, I came across a whole bunch of letters of James Wolfe because a lot of his letters have survived, interestingly. And like it was just a convergence of things, and I didn't really choose on my own. It was always kind of with her within me that the choices took place. And as for your question about, you know, what am I, what response am I looking for in readers? I always start with an assumption, which I think is probably correct, that at least most of my readers are smarter than I am. And therefore, they'll figure out what they want to get out of the book. So while I think of the reader as an ally, I do not play to the reader or look for to evoke a particular emotional or intellectual response. I feel that the readers bring their own life experience and their own readings and their own biases and their own takes and their own misgivings, etc., their own sense of humor to the work, and they'll figure out what they want to get out of it. It's up to them. It's not my place to tell them what to get out of it.
So I want to turn now specifically and ask you a question about each of the letters that you read and wrote. First one is the one to your alumni president. And both those librarians gave a pretty blasé response. This would have happened roughly about 1980, I think. And, you know, Me Too wasn't yet on the horizon. And, you know, it seems that this whole situation essentially went unexamined. And it seems also like it's a good metaphor for the issue of mental health that you bring up at the end, that's been left unexamined for too long, in my view anyway. Can you say a little more about what your intention was in writing this specific piece? Were these people, both Ariadne and the young man, outsiders to you? What were you intending from this piece?
Well, my intention, my conscious intention with this piece was what my conscious intention is with every piece in the book, namely to render as well as I can muster for the writer I am today, the thoughts and ideas and writings of Ariadne. But why did she bring me this? Why did she tell me about this particular experience? I mean, I care about mental health issues too. In fact, I have lots of mental health issues myself. How much time do we have? But anyway, but why did this come up and why did it come out in the way that it did? All I can tell you is that when somebody says to me, like, why did you, this story speaks to me, why did you write this story? I always say the same thing, which is like, well, if you like that story, you should see the one in my head, real one.
The one you can never quite get on the page, I bet. That's the way I feel. Anyway.
Exactly.
I'll speak
Yes.
for myself. I'd like to go now to Aspasia and Xanthippe, who I found them really fun. At first, you know, and Xanthippe was such an interesting character to me that, you know, she wants her husband to be remembered in history. When I was researching them, I came across a blog that said Socrates was an idiot. And part of what the blogger had to say was that there's always those types who ask questions, just to ask questions, and the point is they're simply showing off. I wonder, what do you think about that take on Socrates? Like, are you a fan of his? Did you agree with Xanthippe? He needed to be saved. Obviously, he didn't. But where were you coming from on that one?
Well, I am going to declare myself now as an unabashed, unapologetic fan of Socrates. I am not, however, always a fan of Plato. And I haven't read Xenophon, so I can't comment on him, but I can tell you that I have read that both Plato and Xenophon did mention Aspasia in their writings. About the guy, the blogger, saying that Socrates was an idiot. Well, I consulted Ariadne on that one. I quite frequently talk to my fictional people. It's okay, I know they're in my head, I'm fine, but I did consult her, and we both think that Socrates was probably quite a bit smarter than the blogger is.
Mhm.
And, if there are idiots in Socrates, in those Socratic dialogues, as remember, as rendered by Plato, if there are idiots in there, it's the guys that Socrates talks to who sometimes come across as compliant sycophants. And I'll bet they really probably weren't all that way either. So the problem lies not with Socrates, but with Plato, who was not a playwright and did not give a rounded picture of people, which is why, as Xanthippe says, through Ariadne, through me, Socrates should have written this stuff down. He really should have.
And how come you chose to have Xanthippe write to Aspasia?
Well, I think that Xanthippe has the instinct that Aspasia will listen to her, and she has a lot of respect in her own right for Aspasia, and she knows that Aspasia. She feels that Aspasia is a person of integrity, and she doesn't feel that way about any of the guys that hang out with Socrates. She thinks they're all taking advantage of him. So Aspasia doesn't follow him around town. She goes around doing her own thing, her own philosophizing, her own, royal life, whatever she's doing. And she's kind of a natural choice. And what I really like about Xanthippe in this letter is that she insists on paying.
Okay.
Pay the writer. It's so important to pay the writer.
Girls rule. Girls rule. Okay, well, I see that we've got just very few minutes left, so I'm gonna ask me a couple of questions if you want.
Okay, I'm gonna ask. I will, but but Kyle, can you come in for a second, please? I just want to know, like, will we die if we don't finish at 8 o'clock?
No, we can go over this. We got some wiggle room.
Yeah, okay, we have wiggle room. So because I don't want like me to have had a chance to answer the questions and Lenore has to say, that's not fair.
I'll say that whether I've got time or not, so don't worry.
Oh, well, do you have time to stay, Lenore?
Oh yeah, no, I have time to stay.
Okay. Well, if you have time to stay and Kyle has time to stay, I sure as hell have time.
Okay. Shoot.
Okay, so let me start with the first story that you read, Gladiola Island, a story which I will forever point anybody to who ever again, this is about belonging, says to me, why don't you ever go on writing retreats? And I'm going to say, read this story. So on page 45, I'm just going to do a little quote here, and then I'm going to ask you a question based on the quote. She breathes in, breathes out, tries to be mindful, looks to the horizon for balance. For a moment, all she can see is ocean rolling up to meet the sky. It should have liberated her. Can you comment on Vanessa's state of mind, and more specifically on the should have part of it, as it relates to the decision to her decision to attend the writers' retreat and perhaps to other decisions she's made?
Yeah, I think, yeah, there's actually a lot packed into that little bit. You know, she's not really sitting well with a lot of decisions she's made recently in her life at that point. She's recently left her marriage, her job has evaporated. She's searching for identity. She's grabbed onto this idea that she's going to become a writer. And underneath all of that, the biggest issue that won't stop squirming for her is that, you know, she's decided she's not happy about being 60, and there's not a lot you can do about that. So, you know, really at this point, her challenge is to liberate herself from that issue, and to figure out how she can come to realize that, you know, this is the next 10 years are the next best 10 years you're going to have, baby. Get on with it. Old is not a dirty word. There's lots of stuff to do still. So stop being trapped by your own circumstances, and stop looking over your shoulder. Really, I guess is what I, you know, kind of built into that in my own head anyway. You know, I'm not Vanessa, but I must say I've had periods in my life, and starting when I can't believe it when I think back now. I remember turning 20 and thinking, oh my God, it's over. I mean, it's just stupid, but so, you know, I'm glad I kind of had that crisis at the age 20, because I realized, okay, that's just stupid. That's just dumb. So, you know, when I turned 60, it wasn't actually as bad as I think it has been for some of my friends, but it's not easy for sure.
No, it isn't. Page 46 on Gladiola Island, here is a sentence that caused me to actually stop reading the story for about a 3-minute laugh. Men don't go to writing workshops, especially not with their wives. Does this observation of Vanessa's say anything about her sense of belonging and what it means for her to belong, and how she views other people's perceptions of belonging, and how she attempts to either belong or separate herself from others?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, she's already questioning whether she belongs with a group of writers, and you know, she senses something's in the wind just by looking at all the characters on this ferry headed over to the island. She knows something's not right, and it seems like it's about to get worse. And then, you know, the worst is confirmed to her, that not only is she going with a group of writers that she thinks she doesn't belong with, she's actually going to get stuck with an even bigger group of married people. That, you know, she's trying to be this swinging 60s sort of liberated woman, a single woman, and you know, she's just surrounded by all these people who have got marriages that are not in great shape, but they're hanging in. And I have to say, I got to broaden this up a bit. Men don't seem to go to workshops. I'm sorry, Kyle, maybe you do, but they don't seem to go to workshops of any sort, you know, painting, pottery making, writing. And it still to this day, you know, the most of the books, this thing that do really well, except for this a few genres, seem to be written by men. Most of the big paintings seem to be painted by men. So I don't get it. This whole, you know, I don't get it. Like, out of the font of what? Where did the men get it from? But anyway, that's kind of off the point.
I don't think it's off point. But now I have to ask you, Kyle, can I ask her a couple questions about Acorn or not?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure the time thing, you know.
Okay, yeah,
Um,
go.
okay. So this is now about the story Acorn. On page 93, I actually have a couple of questions. One question's about Vanessa and Rudy, and then a couple of linked questions about Vanessa and Mrs. Bridgman.
Okay.
Who would you like to talk about first, Mrs. Bridgman or Rudy?
Oh, no, I like Rudy.
Oh yeah, I like Rudy too. I don't like Mrs. Bridgman much though.
I think you like her, you dislike her more than I do, but anyway, let's talk about Rudy, and if we have time, we'll go to Mrs. Bridgman.
Okay. So page 93, secretly, she liked him quite a bit, but she couldn't risk showing him friendship when the rules around social bounds were so tight at the school. What are those rules? And how in her mind do they stop her from showing that she likes Rudy?
Well, you know, I was playing with that rules in the a broad social sense, and I also like the fact that actually I think the actual quote says rules of engagement. I like that word engagement in there because I know it's a military term, but it's also it's got that romantic double meaning. But you know, I think it's no different now than when I was a kid at school. The cool kids make the rules, whoever the cool kids are in your particular school. And if you're not one of them, then you know, you're out of it. And anybody who is different from whoever the cool kids are is suspect. And that amorphous group of people that are left out, all the different kids, they have trouble coming together because they are all from different, you know, different categories of people that have been left out. And even within their group, they have their own pecking order. Like Stephen was kind of at the bottom of that class. And then Rudy and Vanessa were kind of messing around for second to last. And you know, it's just, it goes on, and that's just a little microcosm of society. But those were the rules that the cool kids made, as far as I'm concerned anyway. So I don't know, do we have time, Kyle, or do you want to open it up to the audience? Do you think people want to ask questions?
Yeah, well, if any of our audience members have a question, please feel free to drop it in the chat. I do see one relating to men in workshops. Do you think men might be disinclined to attend workshops because they have wives who create the workshop space for them? That's posed by Barbara Scott.
Because wives?
They create the workshop space for them.
I'm not sure what you mean, Barbara. Do you mean that the wives create the workshop space, or they don't create the space for them to go? I'm not sure. I personally think men just aren't workshop types. I don't know, Kyle, you should answer that question.
Well, I can, from my experience, there's like it's oftentimes I'm like the one of maybe two guys there. I think oftentimes men don't want to receive criticism. You know, they think they have it figured out. But also, like, workshops are such a communal space where, you know, you have to share and respect each other's opinions. Not everybody's writing in a workshop is for everybody else. And sometimes I think men have a bit of a, you know, a bit of an ego, let's say, and or a maybe like a bit of an individualist flair. I can be a genius over here on my own. Personally, I think the workshop space is one of the most generous and productive spaces for writers of all kinds to participate in. And so I wish more people felt open to it.
Mm.
That's just my 2
Okay,
cents.
well, may I speak to that question as well? About that men don't like, well, I mean, it has been suggested here that men don't like workshops, but women do. So I'm going to declare here openly, perhaps at the risk of losing a lot of friends, that I do not go to workshops. I don't believe in workshops for myself. Every writer is different. For me, nothing shuts me down faster than to have anybody say anything about a work in progress.
Mm.
So I will do my damnedest with a piece, and I will stay with it alone. I may write side by side with another writer. That's kind of fun. But I will not seek any feedback until I feel I've gotten it as good as I can. And then the feedback that I will seek will be from an editor if it's accepted for publication. So that leaves me, I feel, very much in the minority as far as just about all the women writers that I know go. But I do believe very much in helping my fellow writers. And I do believe very much in writers socializing with each other. But, please let us not attribute to one gender, only a particular point of view, because it does not belong only with that gender. There's always me.
And I'm just going to add, Barbara, I see has added in the chat that it's clarified. She says, I mean that women still have a tough time getting a room of their own that's quiet and uninterruptible, but they are pretty good at giving men that kind of space. So, and I see Sharon Butala has asked us a question. She wants to know from each of us, what's next for you, Lenore, and what from you, Rona. So I'll just
you go.
Right now, Sharon, I'm the reason I was looking at all those pictures and all the old family stuff is I've started to write some nonfiction again, even though I swore after Hidden Lives, True Stories from People Who Live with Mental Illness that I was never going to write nonfiction again. I seem to be back there, and it's pretty much based on that topic too. Whether it's going to come together, I don't know. And I once heard a writer say that they thought fiction writers were the most courageous, which I just to this day don't understand. It's much harder to put yourself on the line. Maybe if you're writing a geography textbook or something, that's maybe not as hard as fiction. But anyway, you need to know a lot. But to me, creative nonfiction is the toughest. So that's why I'm not sure whether I'm ready to say much more. How about you, Rona?
I'm devoting most of my personal writing. I have an editing practice as well, and apologizing practice, if there is such a word. So I'm doing work related to both of those. But in my writing life, I am primarily working in creative nonfiction as well. I'm putting together a book of personal essays, and it is killing me.
Yeah, is it? Okay, I get it. Yeah. Is it because it's dredging up stuff, or is it because you're just not sure anyone will care, or all of those?
It's because I don't go to workshops where people will say to me, well, most of it's crap, but I really like what you did in paragraph 3. I don't go, so I don't hear that. So I think it's all crap.
Okay. Well, I just want to thank everyone who came tonight, and I really appreciate so many of you stuck right through to the end here, even though we've gone about 10 minutes over. So
Lenore, it's 10 minutes well spent.
10 minutes well spent. Okay.
I also loved it. It was great. And you have been great to work with. The best part of this whole thing has been getting to know you better. And Kyle, to you and Han, really exceptional work.
Yes, it's been really a great work.
Especially because you're
workshop.
talking.
I call it a workshop. Oh my God, it's been a great reading.
Oh my God, no!
Well, it's certainly a pleasure to coordinate with the two of you, and it's such a pleasure to have the opportunity to hear you speak about your work through the discussion, and of course, listen to you read. So thank you very much to both of you for sharing your words with us. I will issue another reminder that we have quite a few copies of both books here at Shelf Life. If you're interested in owning one, you are more than welcome to stop by the store. We're also, we have our online store. We're offering curbside pickup and free local delivery within some certain restrictions. But if you don't happen to be in Calgary, I do encourage you to visit whatever the local bookstore is closest to you and get a hold of a copy. So with that said, I'll say thank you to everybody who has joined us this evening. I'll wrap up by ending the recording, and if you want to unmute and say a quick hello or goodbye or congratulations, you're more than welcome to do so. So thanks again, Rona and Lenore, and have a lovely evening, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.